Hey, what's up? Hope you're doing well. I've been poking through the November 27 update for Fellowship and wanted to give you a long, honest run through that feels like a real conversation, the kind of breakdown you'd want to hear while you're queuing up for a run or prepping your loadout. The patch that hit on November 27 is one of those mid-cycle updates that's smaller than a major expansion but heavier than a routine hotfix. It's focused on cleaning up rough edges, adjusting several heroes, and tuning dungeon pacing, so the experience shifts a little without flipping everything on its head. The developers framed it as a set of targeted fixes and balance adjustments intended to prime the game for a larger winter update scheduled for December 11th. So think of this as maintenance with teeth, numerical changes, quality of life tweaks, and a few structural shifts that quietly rearrange how you'll approach certain keys. Starting with the user interface and progression touches, the rewards screen received some neat polish. It's easier to see what the next milestone is and where progression is funneling you. Loading screens got updated tooltips that now reflect the dungeon scoring tweaks. So the first thing you'll notice is slightly clearer messaging. Not flashy, but useful when you're juggling rotas and trying to read the meta between runs. There are also a handful of bug fixes in the progression systems. Nothing that rewrites your entire progression, but enough to reduce the tiny annoyances that used to eat minutes across repeated attempts. Now onto the meat, hero balancing. A number of heroes were adjusted, and those changes are distributed across buffs and nerfs. Some heroes that were languishing saw modest improvements. Cooldown reductions here, small increases to baseline damage there, while others that were dominating certain encounters received soft nerfs to tone down specific interactions. A few examples floated in community summaries. Mako picked up some quality of life buffs that make her feel more reliable in prolonged fights, and other champions had cooldown or trait tweaks that shift their roles slightly. The core idea from the devs seems intentional: reduce fragility in certain builds, remove a few looping interactions that felt unfair, and nudge the strongest comps back toward a more diverse meta. I'll be blunt. If you main a character in the top meta brackets, expect to check the new numbers and reevaluate your rotation. Small percentage changes can cascade into meaningful shifts in uptime and burst windows. Dungeon tuning is where the update takes an interesting approach. The designers deliberately redistributed time and challenge away from extended boss fights and toward more meaningful trash encounters. That means some boss engagements have been shortened or had their pacing adjusted, while trash mobs receive tweaks that make them slightly more relevant to a run's total time. The intent is clear: reduce those fights that dragged for way longer than the rest of the dungeon, and instead make trash pulls matter more for score and sustain. Players' reactions are already split. Some welcome the removal of slog bosses that made keys feel like a single long slog, while others fret that trash fights becoming more punishing could turn repetitive trash into a chore. Practically, this affects pull planning and resource management. You'll want to adjust your pulls to account for trash that now deals or demands slightly more attention, because in many cases, that's where the time saved on bosses gets spent. There are also changes to dungeon scoring and curses. The scoring tweaks make certain strategies that relied on boss cheese less efficient. Score now rewards more balanced play across an entire dungeon, rather than concentrated boss-focused strategies. Curses were adjusted to change risk-reward calculations in specific keys, so players who pushed into high curse brackets will need to weigh the marginal benefits a bit differently. That's everything from tempo changes in runs to where you place your consumables. Not huge swings, but meaningful when you're chasing competitive leaderboards. From a community standpoint, the conversation is lively. Forums and discussion threads are dissecting every hero tweak and dungeon change. Some players are vocal about perceived nerfs to their favorite builds, while others praise the attempt to shorten overly long boss encounters. There's also the predictable wave of theorycraft as people test how the new numbers interact with legendary traits and artifact synergies. Those interactions often reveal unintended power spikes or underperforming combos, so expect a few more micro adjustments in subsequent hotfixes if something looks off after broader testing. The patch notes included a list of dozens of bug fixes, some very specific, from UI display errors to rare blocking issues in some dungeon interactions. Those fixes won't make the headlines, but they'll reduce frustration. The release was confirmed on multiple platforms and tracked by third-party changelogs, so the timing and deployment were clean. There wasn't any major outage or rollback, which is a relief. The devs also reiterated that a larger winter update is coming on December 11th, and everything in this patch feels consistent with prepping systems and balance frameworks for that bigger release. What this update ultimately does is nudge the meta and the pacing without wrecking what people already enjoy. It's a balancing act. Keep the core loop familiar while smoothing out problem spots. For players who like methodical theory crafting, this is a delicious little puzzle. Rerun your builds, check precise numbers, and find new rotational sweet spots. For more casual runs, the changes are mostly quality of life. Clearer reward screens, fewer wonky UI behaviors, and slightly better pacing in dungeons. It's worth saying that patches like this tend to ripple. A single percent cooldown reduction or a small buff to sustain can rearrange the leaderboards if players optimize it the right way. So while nothing here looks like a meta-killing bomb, the accumulated effect of several small adjustments is where the interesting gameplay shifts form. Keep an eye on how trash pulls scale with the new tuning, how boss fights feel with shortened windows, and which heroes suddenly become more or less comfortable to play. The overall vibe from the update is careful, targeted fixes, modest balancing, and a push toward making each dungeon minute count a little more.